Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Wine and Reads Presents live Q&A. I am joined by four incredible writers. So what we'll do first, just to start off, is we'll go around and let everyone introduce themselves. Why don't we go clockwise from Danny?
Hi. I'm Danny Oliver. I am the lead developer for the Shadowrun role-playing game, Living Campaign, and so I run the overarching plots. I assign writing projects, and I make sure that we have right now 12 releases a year that are on time. In addition to that, I am the content manager for Rem Alternus, a fledgling media production company. And we are about to, in the new year, kickstart the first issue of my graphic series that's coming out. And also we do a lot of Dungeons and Dragons role-playing game stuff, telling stories and just having a good time.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Tamai Kane. I'm the owner of TK Publishing. I am a content creator, and I too putting out a graphic novel that comes out at the beginning of the year. Shameless plug. Join fraternity.com, check that out. And yeah, I write for Plastic Magazine as well.
Aaron?
Yeah, hey, I don't have quite the resume you guys do, but see, my name's Darren. I'm a writer, just getting ready to release my first book. Spent about 15 years in publishing under Organic Press and Cascade Reader, but those days are long gone. So, yeah, that's it.
Excellent. And I'm Duryea Rashad, founder, artistic director of Woe Nelly Media. I'm also an actor and acting coach and a director. I got my degree in directing. And I'm also a writer. I just recently wrote a pilot, which I'm having a live reading for next Saturday. If you're part of the writer's room, please come to that. It's going to be fun. It's my first comedy. And other than that, I also host these weekly events. Every Saturday, we either do something like this or we do a live reading. And everyone here has been to one or even had their work featured at one. We also do live workshops where each writer submits a short amount of their work, like 10 pages of anything. We all trade and then we get together and just discuss. It's actually really fun. It's one of my favorite activities we do. You just have to have at least 6 writers willing to just jump in there. So if you're interested in any of that, join the writer's room or message me, Duryea Collier on Facebook, and I'll be so happy to. If you put in Duryea, you're probably going to find me. All right.
You're probably Duryea's out there.
Yeah, you're probably, if you spell it right, you'll find me. Okay. So we usually do live Q&A where we take questions from the audience, from the people watching. Hello, Chris Ryan Walker. I see you out there. But today we're going to do it a little differently. We will still take your questions if they pop up, because sometimes the technology is wonky, so we don't get the questions that y'all pop up. But we're going to talk about our individual writing process, how we as individuals go from an idea to the final draft. What goes into cultivating an idea, into really nourishing research, all that kind of stuff. So it's just going to be an open discussion. I kind of want to let Danny start just because him and I recently had a conversation about his the graphic novel he's putting out this year, which is Clockworth Coddles. What is it? I want to say it right, but I like the name. It's really cool.
Coddlesworth's Clockwork Circus.
Okay.
So
how'd you come up with the concept? Go ahead.
Wow, concept, long time in the making. So I'm a fan of all things fantasy and just storytelling in general. And one of the sort of genres that's always kind of fascinated me is like the steampunk genre, right? So you've got that like industrial age / Victorian age, but they have futuristic technology, but it's in the form of objects and devices from that time period, right? So it's like a little bit of an anachronistic sort of setting. And that's always really appealed to me. And then I you steal ideas from everywhere you can. I write for Shadowrun. I've loved Shadowrun since the early '90s when I first played it. And their whole shtick is they took cyberpunk, and they said to themselves, "Hey, what if we had cyberpunk, but then magic came into the world somehow, and now we've got like cyborgs and wizards and trolls and orcs but like corporations and cities, and like what happens when a dragon is the CEO of a company, that kind of thing, right?" So so I kind of like was thinking, you always have in fantasy, you always have magic, but then in steampunk, that's more of a technology-based thing. So I was kind of like, well, what if I did a story about magic with steampunk in that sort of technology? And then I pulled off of other stories that I had to sort of build this world, build the setting, and build the story of why everything happens. And then, of course, besides everything in the world that's going on, we need all good writing for fiction and fantasy and adventure needs solid characters that people are interested in, and see how those characters react to what's going on in the world. And that's it. The circus concept actually comes from friends of mine who do like festivals in the summertime, right? And so there's like the fairy festival, and there's certain pagan holidays and pagan festivals, and a lot of times they'll like dress up, Ren Fair type stuff, and they'll dress up or get in costume and play out as these characters. And one was kind of like a little circus thing, and that kind of gave me the circus idea. And I just pull them from that tree,
Mm-hmm. Okay. Taman, you are also writing a graphic novel. Oh, you already wrote.
Yeah.
And it's coming out. I actually saw if you are in the writer's room, there's a really neat link to the preview for it. So tell us about the project, and also tell us where you got the concept.
Yeah. So like just like Danny, I've always been into like fantasy. I love the occult, anything to do with magic, sorcery, anything of that nature, supernatural stuff. And so I watch a lot of television and films that surround that topic. And so I've always noticed there wasn't a lot of people who look like me, who had shared experiences. When it comes to like magic things, it's really, I guess, I don't know if it's the right thing I can say these days, but it's very heavy on the female side. And there's not really that much representation for us as males as far as being in that space. And so I was watching this show called American Horror Story, and it was apocalypse. So it was about the coven of witches. I was with my friends. I was like, you know what? We are not in this. And, it'd be so cool to see a story that focused on, a group of guys, magic users. And so my graphic novel is called Societe, and Societe is Haitian Creole for witch. And Societe is about a fraternity for sorcerers. And it's also set in New Orleans. But for the first time in this fraternity's history, the descendants of the people who founded this fraternity are being initiated for the first time at the same time. And that's against protocol for certain reasons. And so now we sorcerers around the world being hunted, and we're trying to figure out why. And so yeah, so it's pretty cool. It puts you in the vein of like True Blood, the originals. It's really graphic. It's bloody, it's scary, and it's a little funny too. So all the things I love about those type of projects. But for me, my process always starts with research. It took me 2.5 years to like finish.
Don't wait. We're just coming. We're gonna get to that part.
Oh, okay,
we're just
sorry.
talking. Right. We're gonna get there. We just want to know like how'd you come up with the concept, and then yeah. We'll keep going. All right, Darren. I've had a chance to read the first like 3 chapters of your book.
Yeah,
I know for sure.
Yeah. So my book is called Fallen. It's the first book of 3 called the Jack Chronicles. And Fallen, similar to what Danny described, Fallen was born out of a short story I wrote back in the early 80s when I was really a little more engaged and doing some stuff. And then after several years of working in publishing as an editor, a designer, and a content creator, I got out of that to start working on my own stuff. And so that early piece, that short story I wrote, kept nagging and was always there. And so I write what I call vomit pages. And so where it's just a mental dump, and started to flush that short story out quite a bit. And the way that it's realized really is along the lines of similar genre that, like I said, that Danny was referencing, kind of a dystopian steampunk with magic and dragons and, you know, all these other sort of fantastical elements, and converging them together. And so it is an epic saga. I've been at this. I've been working on not just this book, but the overarching story for probably 10 years. And so now this book is kind of set the pace for others. But it's been a serious creative map, if you will.
It's interesting because as soon as you said it took you 10 years, everybody's like, yep. It's crazy. Okay,
well,
so
you know, so it's interesting because, like, I've had, so just thinking about the process and mechanics of it, and frame within the body of word count, right? Because those represent different industry standards when it comes to publishing, and so I've had this book up to as many as 165, 180,000 words, pared back all the way down to 30,000, you know, for example, and then work it back up. So it's kind of an ebb and flow that represents that creative process, and you got to kind of stick with it until it represents, right? And so I think now I'm done with that final pass, which was really structural to 10. And yes, you've read like 3 chapters, but I'm at chapter 24
now, yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was really cool. I remember.
So 25.
Yes. So as far as my personal process, I'm gonna, like, in general, my concepts always come from like really random stuff. So I have a similar project. I call it my world building project. It's the project that has the most massive world built into it. Well, one of them.
Right.
I came up with it. I don't know. I know it had something to do with Harry Potter because a friend of mine was talking about Harry Potter and I hadn't read the books. And I something about the ending. I was like, I want to see a project that ends like this. And then I said that to her, and she was like, well, why don't you write it? And I was like, okay, cool. And then I thought about writing books, but I was like, I don't want to write 12 books. So, so I was like, okay. But I knew the end. And a lot of times that's usually with world building stuff. That's why I have another world building project that definitely doesn't start with it started at the end of another story. But I think for me, it always starts with like, I have to know where I want them to go. Even if I don't know the end, like an ending point, I know like what the trajectory should be, like what's the motive and what's pushing this locomotive. So for The Prophecy, which is the pilot that I wrote, which is very, very, very heavy. It's one of these things where we go from our regular world, then things happen and the entire world changes. But it happens gradually over the seasons. And when I started creating that project, I did a lot of research too, which we'll talk about research. But yeah, that's how my concepts come about. And a lot of that came from very similar things. I wanted to create a story that showcased Black people in a supernatural world.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of us that are huge geeks of this genre, but there's like barely any representation. So I wrote the screenplay originally for me and my friends, and then, you know, understanding the industry more, they're like, oh, well, just because you write it doesn't mean you'll necessarily get attached to it. Most likely, but not always. So the one caveat I decided was like, okay, so I'm gonna make the main character Black, and most of the rest of the characters are his relatives, blood, and it has to be blood because of the magic. So just because of that, these all are byproduct Black people. But it was also important for me that everyone wasn't Black. I wanted to, because the world that I live in isn't all Black. So I wanted to make characters in this world that actually looked like the world I exist in, which is different shades. So that's where my process came from for the project. So I guess we each are going to be talking about one project. I guess that's how it looks like it's going right now. Okay, so let's move on to research, since everybody's so we can research. So when it comes to research, I hate research. I hate it. Like, it's crazy. I was writing this project with a friend of mine, and we got to this point in the script where one of the characters used magic. And I'm more of a J.K. Rowling-ist when it comes to magic. Like, I'll take something derived in a type of magic or a type of language and then create a word out of it. And my writing partner's like, nah. They were like, it needs to be authentic. If it is not Latin or if it's not this stuff, we can't have it. And so I kind of hear about your research processes. Do you love the research process? Do you hate the research process? Let's start with Taman, since you did want to talk about that.
Yeah, so the research is my actually favorite part of it. It's sort of like a love-hate because I can go down a rabbit hole. I'm like, oh my God, that's so interesting. And I want to research something else about that. And then I have to research something about that. And then I'll look up and I haven't written a thing. I've just been researching all day, which is okay, but you still have to write. But I went to New Orleans for like 2 weeks. My family's from New Orleans.
So you went there just you went there to research, or you were there and researched?
I went to research and I was there also. So like, I guess it's the opposite. So I went there for that. But of course, I love New Orleans. I experienced the city. But all the things like they have different witch groups there that you can go speak to. Of course, they have people in the French Quarter who set up tables and do fortune telling. And when I was there, was during Mardi Gras. I went there for 2 weeks, like during Mardi Gras, and Native Americans were in their traditional attire. They were in the streets, and I interviewed this guy. And in the interview, he was just telling me about their heritage and their power and how they lost their power. And it was so inspiring to see another culture's, I guess, take on their traditional, how they practice and all those type of things. But other than going to New Orleans for 2 weeks, I've researched and have books and books and books about different magical practices, because my story is set in New Orleans, but the main characters from all around the world. So I've been tackling different types of magical practices. From hoodoo to voodoo, from Middle Eastern to, of course, things that we see all the time, which is Latin and things of that nature. So yeah, the research that's a journalist to me. That's the fun part.
See, I like that. I like mine because mine is definitely based in research. It's like, I remember when I started researching Wiccans and Wicca. There's these different types of witches that you don't really hear about, and so I took real practices, but I just molded them into my world.
Absolutely.
Because I think it's interesting if it's based in some realism. You know what I'm saying? Especially when you have your audience and they're gonna like suspend their disbelief, but they want you to create a world because they don't want to see something they've seen.
Exactly.
So you have to find that balance between having it be authentic and believable, but fresh and new. So what about your research, Darren?
I mean, that's the beauty of fiction and fantasy, right? You can kind of just make it all up, but to be plausible, as I dream up a technology, for example, I'll then just spot check and go out and read on a particular subject matter. Maybe it's anti-gravity, multi-directional forces or whatever, or some aspect of optics or physiology, and like robotics. I get really into robotics and whatnot. So, and I read a lot of technical journals, and part of that is just because of my job in my day job, but I try to research as little as possible, frankly.
Yes.
And really focus on just writing. And as I'm writing, I'll highlight and make note of certain aspects that need to be flushed out and thought through to further build the character and the scene. So that, like you said, you're walking that tightrope between fantasy, but also is it plausible, and try to manage that as best I can. But I try to research as little as possible, actually.
Yeah, because I think sometimes it's easy to get stuck there on the research.
Yes.
Especially if you like
Right.
it, especially if you like the research. But it's easy to just be like, because I obsess, like, is it right? Is it right? Or maybe I should look at another book.
Well, it depends on the genre and what you're writing. It totally depends. I mean, if you're writing historical fiction or not, your research needs to be much more astute, I think, and representative of historical facts. But if you're
Yeah.
writing about multi-worlds, new worlds, you, it requires less. It just needs to be plausible. So I try to, navigate that way. But I have other projects that are more research intensive in terms of there's more importance to have even innuendos grounded in basis of fact, and logic. So
Okay,
just depends.
go ahead.
And I think, like for my subject matter, I guess it's all of our subject matter. It's a craft. And so like for me, the most research goes into like rituals and things of that nature, even organizational structure, because it's about a fraternity. So, like making sure that certain rituals make sense. It doesn't have to be like exactly what we study, but like you said, it has to be grounded in reality, but still it needs to be some type of escape for the reader. So just being able to research enough to understand the basics of it, and then you can expand from there.
It's interesting.
Right.
Before I go to Danny, it's interesting about the research thing. When I was doing a project, I did a project that was about these 6 characters, and they're each. It's kind of like existential abstract, but realism. But each one of them is dealing with a certain theme, and one of the characters, the way that theme is personified in her story is that she's debating whether she's going to have a child or not, and I did research on abortions, but clearly not enough, because when I had a read, the women were like, "Oh no, you can't. No, this is all." And so it's interesting though, because for me, I just wanted to get the work out, but those parts of it that seemed like so small, like I really needed this one scene to happen, but they were like, "But if you're being honest, that scene can't happen," kind of sort of thing. Does that make sense? What I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And it's tough because you can get hung up on, and that can become a major roadblock if you don't do your research first. So Danny, when it came to you and researching for your project, what was that process like?
So yeah, I mean, first of all, there's the rabbit holes. I mean, if I want to learn about something, I'll start looking at it, and then it's just like Taman said, it's you see this other neat thing that you didn't even consider, and you're like, oh, what's this? And then it just happens. And I guess the good thing is I get this breadth of information that just is now in my head about stuff that maybe I can pick up on later. But yeah, sometimes it can really just take over that process. However, I guess I'd say that I enjoy the research. I just have to kind of, make sure that I stay on track, because it's like you say, the suspension of disbelief requires not only for people to kind of say, okay, I'm accepting magic is in, but you have to kind of give them something to hold on to, because if you try to write something that's completely outside of their experience, they're going to be lost. I mean, I have friends who say, I can't do fantasy because it's not real, and I can't envision it. I just can't. Like, they just have no capacity to do that. So, and then and that's why modern fantasy is really popular, in my opinion, is because I'm sorry, there was a feedback in there.
I got you.
So yeah, modern fiction, modern fantasy is really popular because it takes these fantasy elements, but then it puts them into environments that people know and recognize 100%. We see New York City, we see modern conveniences and that sort of thing. So so the research is not so much like, oh, what, I have to make this city be real, but it's like researching, if I'm building an entire world and there's a section that's analogous to, say, Asia, then I need to look at Asian architecture, and I need to look at Asian traditions, and I need to follow all these things. And then the next thing, next part of research, and some writers don't, and this kind of goes back to your story, Duryea, part of your research is people too, talking to people, right? So inclusivity and diversity is important to me as well. And so my book, I want to have it be inclusive. I want people to see representation for themselves in there. But I am cisgendered, straight, male, that pretty much passes as white, right? So I don't know necessarily all these people's like actual stories and stuff. So in order to make sure that I do it justice, I need to check in with people a lot. I need to say, hey, there's a section of my world where it could be considered like colonialism type stuff, and that's a touchy subject for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so I want to make sure that I talk to indigenous people about their experience, and making sure that I respect the ideas that kind of that they are considering and thinking about when I'm creating a people that might have this indigenous feel. Right. Same thing for homosexual characters. I want to make sure that I'm talking to LGBTQ plus people, so that I am not putting forth a caricature of LGBTQ relationships and people. You know what I mean? So that's also part of the research. So yeah, it's a lot of it. And then also internal research in the fiction itself, right? So like if I made a city, I'm making it all up, but I have to, it's like I'm researching the city I made up. It's just, instead of looking it up on the internet, I'm looking it up in my brain, right? So like this has to work, in order for this to work this way, these other parts got to kind of fit in. And so it's like creating, but it's part of the process that you can also get really hung up on too.
It's interesting because it makes me, there it goes. Don't you hate when it's always after you, Danny? When we're talking about world building, and I wanted to piggyback on something you said about
cities.
No, it's not cities. Okay, I'll think of it later. All right. So after you're done, look, I'm not gonna sit here for like 8 hours trying to remember my thought. My brain's not working. Researching to build a world. Okay, so after you've done the researching, the next step in the process for me would probably be like an outline or sketch, but I don't like sketches and outlines. I'm a daydreamer sketcher because I don't like to waste paper, and I get frustrated staring at a blank screen. So like I said, like I kind of have a trajectory. Now it depends on what I'm writing. If I'm writing a screenplay, and I like television writing, so I go with my act breaks, the way each act is supposed to end. That's what I set up as my goalpost first. Like, what are the big moments? I know books are different, so Darren will kind of let us know about that. And then you all do graphic novels, which I recently found out you have to write a script for that, which I think is totally awesome. But yeah. So let's talk about that. This time we'll start with Darren. So when you're writing your novel, especially with the word count, because that's a whole different process that you have to think about. What is that? So after you've done your research, what's your next step?
Well, it's writing. it's literally, just brainstorming, writing it out, reading what you've written, writing it again, and it's a constant, back and forth. So like I said earlier, is it plausible? Constantly asking questions to try to take it as you would want the reader to experience it. So the next step after, and it really isn't fair to say it that way, because the research doesn't just, oh, this is my block of research and now I don't research anymore. It's a constant, practice throughout the writing process. And so I will write, then I will read, and then I will go research, and then I will read again, and then I will edit, and then I will write. And so it's these blocks of activities that are like microcycles in the writing process that keep going and rolling forward. And I think about it very much in terms of script. I I title each of my chapters, and so each chapter is kind of a short story in a way. But that's my writing process, anyways. Is the entire research, editing, and everything is all happening, constantly from start to finish.
And especially once you add editing, once you get to the phase when you're editing, I feel like you never stop editing.
Well, even there, I mean, I edit as I go, and I'll get a chapter and then, read it, edit, research it.
I have more questions about editing soon. Danny, I was going to go to you next anyway. What were you saying though?
I was just saying, self-editing is a trap. You're gonna do it. Every writer's going to do it. Period. Right. But self-editing can be a trap. You can sit there and second guess yourself back to what you originally wrote. It happens.
Right.
So, as far as the kind of what's next for me, it's outlining the project completely. Right. It's me deciding what the story beats are. What do I want to have happen in the story? There's so for the graphic medium, there's definitely some things that in my head are going to be really cool if they happen sometime in the book, like some sort of big magical thing happens. There's going to be an airship, right? So like these reveals or these things or these places that we're going and I want to like show in the world, they have to appear, but they also have to appear naturally. So what I do is I set up, these are things that I want to show. And then I set up my story beat. So this is what's going to happen throughout the story. So they're going to do this. This conflict's going to happen. They're going to meet the bad guy eventually, right? There's going to be this reveal, these complications, and then I can kind of start putting them together in an order that makes sense in terms of that outline, so that I can see before I start writing like where the story goes. So the plainest examples for issue 1 is we're going to introduce the characters, we're going to introduce the setting, right? And so that's what book 1 is. It's about introducing most of the core characters and introducing sort of like the world as a setting. So then I want to write my issue. And so each issue, it's like, it's scripted. It's like a show, each issue has to kind of stand on its own when you're doing that.
Yeah.
And so there's got to be, you want to have some sort of, conflict within that story somewhere. You want to continue to develop your characters as you go, and all of it without telling your audience, right? You want your audience to just kind of naturally see everything and learn everything organically as the story is progressing, as much as you can. I mean, there's never a case, I think, where you can 100% avoid exposition, but yeah.
Okay. Tamon?
Yeah, so my favorite thing, and which is my next step, is character development. So like I build Bibles for each of my characters, and even the story itself. Yeah. So each of my characters have their own notebook, and I'm old school. I don't type until like I get ready to write. So I'm ready to move forward. So like I write in notebooks and journals all over the place. And so each of my characters, I think about their past, present, and future, who they were, who they are currently, where they're going to go. I'm just like you. I write from the end. Like I know like the season finale. I know what happens in the finale. How I get there is the fun part for me. But as it relates to like character development, that is my ultimate favorite thing to do. And I spend it a lot of times because, characters are the story. And so I spend a lot of times building those characters, figuring out, even from figuring out who their parents were, what type of relationship do they have with their parents, even if their parents are not even involved in the story at all. I think about those relationships with their parents, with their friends, how were they raised, because it helps me think about their choices that they make, and that's all the story is characters' choices, right? And so I spend a lot of time building those Bibles for those characters, even down to the fun stuff, like what do they like to wear? What do they like to eat? Do they play video games? Are they single? What are their single behaviors? Like anything you can think about an individual, like we do for ourselves. That's what I work on in the next stage of my writing process.
Dope. It's interesting because mine is kind of like a toss-up of all these things. I like to call it like world development. So once I've done my research, and my research is generally on, I'm for the prophecy specifically, like I knew I had the characters, I knew what they did as far as how they served the plot. Who they were came later, and then the things that were going to happen in my script and why they happened. Just a hint, even if you see it, my script is one of those scripts where the main villain is present in your face the whole time of the series. Absolutely. In one way or another, right? In one way or another, they're very visible, but you just don't really notice what you're looking at. And in order to do that, I had to like be so like strategic and meticulous about like what, where, and so that took what I call like my development phase. And what happens in my development phase is, because this has all happened before I sat down to write the pilot. What happened in my development phase is a lot of things that I thought were going to happen couldn't happen. I wrote this one storyline for these two people to fall in love, and I was like, that won't work. You know what I'm saying? I was like, because now they're in this one dies, so they don't meet each other anymore. So, you know, you have to, I would say you definitely need to be flexible if you do find yourself in a development phase, be flexible in where you allow, don't try to force your character to do something that they're telling you they don't want to do.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So go ahead.
And also like the world itself or places like characters too, right? And so, like, for an example, it's a TV show called Once Upon a Time. Once Upon a Time does a great job at building characters, and Storybrooke is where it takes place. Storybrooke is its own character. And so I think Danny mentioned something about places or settings a few moments ago. I was like, yeah, spending time on developing the place, developing the town, developing the people in the town, the stores that are in the town, you know, the libraries in the town. All those things are so important to like your stories.
I actually remember what I was going to say earlier, so I'm going to say it now. When you're researching, I was thinking about like the things that caught me off guard were the things that I didn't expect I was going to have to research. Of course, like I said, the prophecy goes from like the world as we know it to a different world. So when people start dying, there are police and they investigate crimes. And that was not something that I thought, I didn't really care. I did the worst kind of research ever. I just watched a whole bunch of SVU. But still, you know, it was something, but it was something that like I didn't think about. So it's always those kind of things you have to think about as well. All right. So step 1, we conceptualize. Step 2, we research. Step 3, we outline/develop. Okay. So we've got our outlines down. We're ready to start writing. Are you all just write as you like vomit writing? Do you do chapter by chapter, beat by beat? We talk about how we plan it, but how do you actually fill in the blanks? Let's start with Danny. You're muted.
So I do a lot of improvisational storytelling as a dungeon master, right? As a game master for various role-playing games. And so a lot of what I'll do is I'll just sit down and I'll start writing without any care for like details, right? So I'll say, I mean, it'll almost be like outline writing. So let's say, for example, a recent module that I kind of wrote in, I would put in, okay, the main characters meet with the fixer who gives them a job. That job is to go meet up with a musician who is being threatened by racist organization. You know, and then I start fleshing those things out as well, right? So after I'm done, I kind of have my whole story written, but it's only like 3 paragraphs. It's like a synopsis. And then I'll go in and I'll start fleshing out, okay, how does this work? How do I want to envision this? And then I start adding my descriptives and that sort of thing. For the graphic novel, it was a lot different. I basically wrote a story kind of in the same way, but then I kind of knew that I needed to write it as a script. And so because I just started like researching a little bit. And so I tried to change it into a script, which is a whole different style of writing than prose writing. And then when I got my illustrator and showed them the script, they they started teaching me a little bit more about how actually, like, as a comic script, how what they needed and how it would work for them. And I'm really blessed to have an illustrator who's experienced and shares, you know, knowledge with me. So, but yeah, and so it just kind of goes like that until I have the script written out, and then I submit it, and then we illustrate it.
Okay. Darren?
Yes, sir. So
Yeah.
kind of going back to, I beg your pardon?
Nothing. I was saying you're good.
Going back to what I was saying before, and what Danny was kind of describing, is that's part of the editing process, and at least the context of what I mean, because certainly self-editing is a dangerous proposition, but when I sit down to begin, it's knowing the arc of the story, and very much having consideration for each of the different characters that are coming into play. Sometimes and I kind of just write vomit. I just dump it out and then read it, and because I know by that time what the arc of the story is. And so I guess some of the pre-work is definitely outline and storyboarding. I do a lot of storyboarding in that regard. And then as far as developing the characters, and just that whole process, it is a lot of dialogue that I try to focus on, and I have a lot of books just to get and whatnot on prop structure. So again, there's your research element coming back into play. But I really try to be sensitive to what the reader's experience might be as I sort of build this stuff out, and thinking about the different character nuances and weird syncs that they have with other characters, and often as I'm moving through it, the story does take on its own sort of progression and direction. It's my job to kind of guide it, but new characters will present themselves, and then it's kind of back to that same process, and it's sort of running this new character, if that happens, through a criteria. I mean, are they relevant? Is this a character who's got to die, or or whatever
Right.
the situation may be? But constantly, again, going back through that sort of write, edit, read, and that whole grinding process as you go along. And you get into structural edits, and again, I'm writing prose. I'm familiar with writing short script for comics. This book I'm about finished with very much is in the vein of graphic novel, and I need an illustrator, Danny. So you are fortunate, an illustrator that you partnered up with for sure. Anyways, I mean, I know I kind of talk in a lot of different areas at once, but I see you've changed the title now, filling in the blanks.
Well, what I meant by filling in the blanks is that, the blanks in between the goalposts we set up in our outlines. So creating the body.
And that's
yeah.
Right. And that's where, like, I've gone back and, and I pay attention to word count too. If I've got one chapter that's like 500 words, I'm totally extreme compared to maybe 2,500 words or 5,000 words or whatever. I pay attention to that and I come back to it. So again, it's that process of constant reading and making sure that the dots are all connected, that the reader's getting what you want out of it. So,
Okay.
But even that's pretty subjective. So,
all right, Taman.
It takes so long for me to actually start typing something. Like
Really?
It takes me so long to get to that process, because my outlines is written in my notebook. And so I think Danny said that he'll do like a synopsis of what this act or what this chapter should be. And I do the exact same thing. Like for the graphic novel, I do a complete synopsis of what it is, even like little things like what this smells like in this part, or someone's facial expression, or a quote that I may think of that I want to include when I actually sit down to write it. But it takes me so long to get to the point where I'm actually ready to write. And I think for me, that probably is a pro and a con because I want it to be, and this is a horrible word to use for us, but like I want it to be perfect before I sit down to type. Unfortunately, that's not
Right. No,
unfortunately,
that's not.
that's not a thing because by the time I sit down to type, I have my notebook to the left and I'm typing, and then I stop looking and I just go forward, right? But I like to have as much of an idea of what this act feels like and what it feels like for not just me, but as a reader or a viewer, and what I want the message to be in a section. So I spend a lot of time on thinking. That's the piece.
Mhm.
That's thinking and thinking about what this feels like, what this looks like, what I really want to say. Is it perfect? You know, but yeah, that's my process and filling in the gaps is trying to organize as much as possible. So when I sit down and type, I know exactly like which directions I'm going in,
Right.
and I'll just go that way because I live by outline.
You
Just like
probably
most of
save
us
more
writers.
time. You probably save more time in the by doing that so much pre-work. You probably like sit down at the table. I'm assuming a lot less time than I would. So when it comes to me, when it's time for me to fill in the blanks, I'm more like Darren. Like I know the goalpost, I know the story, and then I really let the characters drive after that. Like I sit down I remember the first time I just wrote the screenplay, the pilot that we're gonna have the reading for next week. The first scene of it, I didn't know what it was gonna be, so I was like, okay, let's put it in this place. And then a new character popped up and had to interact with them because of what they were doing. And then that's what made the scene interesting. I knew how I wanted the scene to begin and end, and then this third character that I didn't even think I was gonna use came. I guess I'll be specific. So I'm trying to be so like not specific. Basically, they're in like a jail visitation room and they're having this conversation. They touch each other and the CO comes in and is like, hey, quit touching. And I was like, now my CO is the conflict because I needed a conflict and I didn't want it to be between the two of them. So then I let the characters drive me. And so that's what happens a lot of the time for me in my process, just to be succinct about it. Okay. So last one, we're going to kind of ball these last ones into one question. So we're going to say feedback / editing. So when you decide to, once you've done everything, you've gone from conceptualization to research and development to outlining to filling in the body of your work. Now you've finished a product and it is time for, it's your first draft, not your final draft, it's your first draft. And this is the part where you hopefully get some feedback from somebody and you edit. So what is that? And I'm talking about first, second, third draft. What is that whole process like for you when you go from your initial feedback to what you end up with that's as close to polished as you want? Let's start with Darren.
It feels like a lot to unpack. What's the question more succinct? What are we after here?
So after you've done writing the body of your work, when you start your editing process, what is your editing process like when it comes to getting feedback and then applying that feedback or not?
Oh, well, tactically, thinking about it just in terms of the mechanics, again, of process, there's a couple of things that I do. I mentioned word count earlier. Chapter, for me, that represents pace to a great extent. But I look at the beginning and end of each chapter and really hone in on the transition of the story and look at the again the pace and the overall flow. And when you're dealing with a lot of different characters and a lot of layers to the story, which is inherent with building worlds, it's a grind, and it's really back and looking at the ending and the beginning of all those transitions And then from there, you know, going and looking at the body, I'll focus on 1, 2, or 3 chapters at a time, and just gradually move from front to back. And I'll kind of do that a few times, actually. I've forced myself to accept that it's okay if I need to dump, you know, 1,000 words, you know, and I'll take huge chunks out, and they go into a different book because they're out of sync with the arc of the story. And so there's a lot of really tedious work. I mean, I look at every single word, and I look at dialogue flow and all of that. But really, it is getting into the weeds at that point once you kind of string the beginning to the end, and then you go back and it's just making sure that those transitions flow are something that are going to be pleasing, not only pleasing for the reader to read, but also whether or not there's value directly to the story and what's supposed to be happening. And but that's kind of just what I do, and again, my process, and it's you know, both macro and micro perspectives when it comes to that editing process.
Awesome. Taman?
I walk away from it. Like, anyone who knows me, I despise the editing process. Like, it's the top of my list of the least things I like to do. And so, and that's from, you know, I do a quick grammar thing, but I have an editor who's been editing my work since college. So bless his heart for dealing with all the stuff that I sent to him. And then I also believe in supporting the paid services to get some objective opinions and some other things that you may not see. But I'm just away as far as the editing stuff. Like, I can, I think Darren said, edit yourself into back to where you started. I've done that before. So you said that, I almost cried because it's like, I get it. Like, I can spend so much time on a section and then reread it like, you know what? Let me go back to exactly what it used to be, because that makes more sense. And then when I took to the end, it was like, oh, actually, I like the direction that you went in. And so the editing process for me is brief. To say the least, I don't like to do, like I said, but I'll read everything. I'll make sure it makes sense, and I'll make sure that the content or the message that I want to give out in that certain scene is delivered. And normally I can feel like it have gaps in continuity, or I can feel if it doesn't make sense or feel authentic to myself or the characters of the story. But I'm a creature of feedback, so I love to sit my work out and give me some feedback on it and tell me what you think, and just grow from there.
Okay, excellent. Danny? You're muted.
You're muted.
I want to touch on what you said about you know, feedback. I thrive on feedback myself. Like,
Yes,
that's how I get through any writer's block, right? If I get stuck somewhere, I have a core group of people that I'll like start talking to about stuff, and they'll like pitch ideas or whatever, and I might not even use any idea that they pitched out, but just that sort of brainstorming process will just sort of kind of kick things in, and the next thing you know, I've all of a sudden got the whole thing that I was stuck on. It's like, now it's all built. I have it all. It just like starts to come out. So feedback is huge. And then also beta readers, which is part of that feedback process. So making sure that it's always good to have someone who's willing to read your book first draft, at least first draft. Some people will like do sections of their book or whatever, so they're not like fully written. But once you have that first draft, you get some trusted people to be your beta readers, people who aren't going to blow sunshine up your rear, so that they can say, hey, this is how I felt. I liked this guy. I thought this about this person, so that you can make sure that their feedback aligns with what you are kind of writing, right? So like, I didn't know that like I was completely making a story that was, pro-life and seemed like a certain thing, right? Because as you were writing, and but when you got that feedback in that read, that's what you want, because you want that for publishing.
Right. Of course.
Like so
of course.
So that's the feedback part. And then I think that the feedback that's what goes in your beta reader feedback. That's what goes into your second draft, not a full editing process. That goes into your second draft, so that you fix the things that your beta readers were kind of like, hey, I didn't understand this, or hey, this, or whatever. And then once you've got that done, beta readers maybe read it again, maybe a different group of beta readers, what have you. But then you should be ready for the actual editing. And my background, more so, like I've always been creative and imaginative, but my professional background is in technical reports and writing for technical purposes. As Duryea knows, I'm an intelligence analyst, 24 years, and at the top end, I was not writing anything. I was editing reports so that those reports could then go out to strategic decision makers who needed to read that. So I know the sort of like the psychology of where people mess up. So self-editing, don't do it, because in your brain, when you read over stuff, unless you have a really meticulous sort of process that you do it where you're like actually able to look at every word separately or something. Some people do, like they'll read it, they'll look at the words backwards, to make sure, what have you. But really, your brain, if you type stuff and you think it says a sentence, your brain's going to read that sentence when you go through. It's not going to see the typo. It's not going to see, it's like that thing that they do on Facebook where they have like a series of gobbledygook, but the first two letters are in the right place.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And then but you could just read it, right? Like that's, your brain works that way. So you need someone else to read it, because they're the ones who are going to read it, and they don't have that notion of what it's supposed to say, so they'll get tripped up over it and be like, whoa, what
right.
And then
that
they
makes
can
so much sense.
fix that. And then full copy edit. So I am an amazing writer. The way I write is perfect. No one never needs to change it. But that's not true, right? The reality is like, that's what a copy editor is the person who's going to read it and just be like, make sure that the flow is right. Maybe like this word is a little odd or jarring. And so that's your copy editor. And that's the person that gets paid the big bucks for it. That's the editor when we talk about an editor. And that's big. And that's also a scary thing, because you have someone else who has their own ideas about how to write that's going to turn around and tell you they're going to change like 25% of your book. Like, and not the story. The story's going to be there. Your character's going to be, everything's going to still be there, but they're going to change around your words a little bit. And you need to have that. That is, especially if you want to publish in actual publishing. Not that I have, but I do know that a lot of people who don't do this editing process, they are forced to self-publish. No one wants to publish them. And every single publisher, every single person that's actually written a book through one of the, I think there's like 5 major publishing houses, and all the other ones are owned by those. Copy editing, like you have to get it copy edited professionally, and then they'll look at it. So, and it's not a cheap thing. Happily self-publishing is a thing these days. So,
right.
You can do that, but yeah, it's rough editing, and creatives don't want to do it. Like Taman said, I don't want to edit. I want to write.
I don't want to edit my own stuff, but like my publishing company, I have to edit other manuscripts all the time, but I do not like to edit my own work.
Right.
So we're right at the hour mark, so I'm gonna give mine and then we're gonna wrap up. I did want to talk a little bit about polishing, but we've kind of touched on that in this last topic. So for me, incorporating feedback is what I consider my half of the editing process. I didn't really consider, I don't know if screenwriters do copy editing and stuff like that. I actually don't know that, and so that's something I need to research. But for me, it is very important to have a group of people who are going to tell you like what's real about your work. And luckily I have those people, and luckily they don't tell you in a harsh way, but I've had a few projects they're like, but that's the good thing about it is when I had the project wasn't bad, it just came off in an offensive way, and they told me. But then on the flip side of that, when they're telling me, oh, this is awesome, then I know, okay, this is awesome. Either way. It is actually my favorite part is editing, because for me, I look at writing like clay. That first draft is me like putting clay on the wheel, and then editing is like me making the vase, if that makes any sense. That's how I feel about it. The research part is like digging up the backyard and like finding water from a dry well. That's how I feel about it for myself. But but essentially, yeah, I really like the editing process, because for me, that's where you get to find all the nuances about your character, this world. That's when you have all these epiphanies about how things can happen. And I think there's so much magic to be found in the editing process. However, we are at the hour mark, a little bit over time today. Actually, no, we're just right at the hour. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We thank Danny, Taman, and Darren. You can find us on Facebook at The Writers Room. We're the only The Writers Room on the Facebook, I believe. Wow. You can also find us on YouTube by searching Woe Nelly Media. That's WOE Nelly Media. And if you want to join the group, and you can also find us on WoeNellyMedia.com. There is a link to the group at the bottom of the homepage. What you can do is you can find us there. You can find us there, and you can also, if you want to have any of your work highlighted for Wine and Reads, which is every Saturday at 6, let us know. We'll organize a reading for your work, and we'd love to have you. Did anyone want to say anything before we go? Go ahead, Dan.
One thing, just for anyone who wants to be a writer, who's thinking about starting writing, I would suggest investing in some tools to help with organization and stuff. So a lot of old school people, they're going to be using notebooks. They're going to keep everything that way. But there's programs like Scrivener, which is a writer's program that allows it's set up for you to have like your chapter beats and places for your characters, so you could write out your character Bible, what have you. I have that. I also use World Anvil, which is for world building, and that has that's a lot of role-playing game dungeon masters do it for their world building, but you can also do it for your book writing and everything. And it has like you can create articles based on the type of thing. So you can create like a city article, or you can create a character article. And then each of those articles, what they come with is a template that has all this stuff to kind of jog your memory. Oh yeah, I need to know about relationships, or maybe I want to know what his personality is like. And so it's got like a spot for date of birth, for, you know, what their mannerisms are. Do they have a bad habit? Do they have a vice? Like, and it just like has all these things for you to say, oh yeah, I want to write that down. And that's important. So it's really useful for that in terms of kind of organizing and creating. And you can set all those things to private so that no one else can see, or if you want to share it, you can set it to public, and then everyone can look at your work. But I do recommend some sort of organizational or writing tool like that.
Excellent. Would anyone else like to say anything before we part?
Yeah, never stop writing. So I'm inspired by everything. Every time I'm out somewhere, it can be a conversation in Starbucks. It can be, something I see on the news, a billboard side. So take the moment, keep a journal with you, write on your phone, whatever type of technology you use, but always write and keep those notes, because I promise you it's gonna pay off. Your memory can hold everything. And last thing is www.jointhepressing.com. Check it out. That's my graphic novel. You can find it on Instagram at Sociate Saga also.
Instagram at Sociate Saga. Is that
Saga? Yes. SOSYE. Saga. SAGA. Sociate Saga.
Okay. All righty. Darren, did you want to say anything?
Cool. Just, don't be afraid to allow yourself a little vulnerability. Write passionately. Don't be afraid. Have fun with it. I mean, really. And be safe. Thank you very much.
All righty. Remember, join the Writers Room, and we're having another Wine and Reads next Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And I hope to see you all there. Be safe. Have a great afternoon or night.
See ya.
Thank you.